We don't know if the whole pictures or videos that we've been seeing are true or fabricated. That's why we asked for investigation into what happened in Khan Sheikhoun. This is the second. Al-Qaeda sources said that the attack happened at 6:30 in the morning, while the Syrian attack in the same area was at around noon, between 11:30 to 12. So they're talking about two different stories or event. So there was no order to make any attack. We don't have any chemical weapons. We gave up our arsenals a few years ago. Even if we have them, we wouldn't use them, and we had never used our chemical arsenal in our history.
Well, in a moment, we'll be talking to Kevin McAleese, who's in Washington, D.C. for us. First, let's go to TRT World's Abu Bakr al-Shamahi. Joins me live from Gaziantep. Abu Bakr, just tell us more about this interview with Assad. He suggested that the pictures coming out of Khan Sheikhoun may have been faked.
Yes, well, he said they're 100% a fabrication. He's saying that Syria, the regime, got rid of its chemical weapons stockpile back in 2013, a part of a deal that was arranged back then, and that even if they did have them, that they wouldn't use them. Now, of course, that goes against what the UN has said in the past. The UN has documented instances of the regime using chemical weapons in various different locations across Syria in the past. And of course, now what the regime is also saying is that, or what Bashar al Assad also said in that interview with regards to a possible investigation, is that he welcomed it as long as it was unbiased, that unbiased countries were involved. And of course, we're not entirely sure what he means by that and what countries in particular, but what Russia did, of course, the regime's ally, which was to veto a resolution at the UN calling for an investigation into the chemical weapons attack in Khan Sheikhoun.
So these were the first public comments Assad has made since that suspected attack in Idlib province. What kind of tone did he strike? What do you think he was trying to achieve here?
Well, in addition to those comments about the chemical weapons attack, which of course was quite insistent that the regime had nothing to do with it, and the regime has tried to put across various different theories as to what possibly could have happened if it wasn't the regime attack, amongst others such as a possible rebel warehouse that contained chemical weapons that was attacked, or even countries that supported the rebels carrying out airstrikes. What he also said was that the US airstrikes or the US missile attack on the Syrian regime base last week had caused no damage to the Syrian regime's firepower, that it hadn't affected it in any way. And of course, to be fair to him, there could be some truth in that Russia was warned or before the attack took place, that the attack was going to happen, and that was then passed on to the regime. So they were essentially given a heads up with regards to that attack, and they have not been attacked by the US since. And Bashar al Assad has essentially now been saying that, you know, the regime has the capability to continue in the conflict, and he also added about with regards to peace talks that the US is not serious about these peace talks, and that it continues to support groups on the ground and support terrorist groups. And of course, if we look at what Staffan de Mistura, the UN's envoy on Syria, has said, he said that peace talks that concluded 2 weeks ago, he now wants to push those countries such as Turkey, Iran and Russia, the Astana confirmers there, he wants to push them to kind of push for a peace deal, but he did not mention the US.
Abu Bakr, thank you for that. Let's go now to Washington, D.C. and join journalist Kevin McAleese. So Assad is saying that these claims of a chemical weapons attack are a fabrication in order for the US to justify an airstrike. I doubt that's going to go down well in Washington.
Yes, no response from the US president or his senior cabinet members on this interview as yet, but of course they will be watching closely to see the response from the man who oversees a regime that they decided to take their first military strike against in the 6 or 7 years now that conflict has been raging. But yeah, an interesting take on this. Expect it from Donald Trump later today, potentially. He has been tweeting already on the likes of China and North Korea. We could hear something from him at some point. But this government is in no doubt, this administration, that this was the right action to take. They are 100% certain that chemical weapons were used against those people in Idlib. That was the condition for them taking this action to launch those 59 Tomahawk missiles from the Mediterranean Sea. The Pentagon say 57 of those actually hit their targets, that all-important airfield infrastructure. That's the airfield that the US government says launched the planes from which these devastating sarin gas attacks were dropped, and that the evidence of the toxic agents was sort of backed up at the UN as well. We heard from the UK representative to the United Nations saying that British scientists had found some traces of sarin at that alleged attack site, and therefore they were going with the United States position that this was a chemical weapons attack, and therefore the justification was there, according to this Trump administration at least, for them to take their first military strike against the Assad regime.
But there's been a lot of talk over the last few days about what exactly is the US policy on Syria. We know that the US is trying to, on the face of it at least, mend bridges with Russia. So could we see a ramped up US military response to the Assad regime, do you think?
Yeah, it's a very complex situation in Syria for this US government, because they obviously don't want a massive military confrontation with Russia there. They have said from the very beginning, throughout Trump's campaign, he said, I want to go after Daesh, but there was no mention of, directly interfering in the civil war and targeting Assad in all of this. Rex Tillerson, who had just been in Moscow, he's saying that relations between the two countries are at an extremely low ebb at the moment, and this situation isn't any clearer, isn't coming into focus anytime soon, exactly where the United States will fall down on Syria. But Secretary Mattis, the Defense Secretary, he said that, this is not the first step. This US strike on Idlib is not the first step towards, boots on the ground, to a larger US military presence, which, of course, remember, would not be popular with Donald Trump's base. They voted for a non-interventionist candidate. That's the guy they wanted in the Oval Office. This step he has taken on Syria is a massive U-turn on the policies, in particular the foreign policies, that he had promised the people who put him in power. So he's got to be careful.
Indeed. Kevin, thank you. Kevin McAleese in Washington, D.C.